Okay, right, it's recording now. So, welcome to Silver Tent TV and the panel today where we're going to talk about what is the truth. Is there any such thing as the truth? It started with an off-the-cuff conversation along the lines of, what if everyone is right? Or the alternative, what if everyone is wrong? Okay, how do you actually work out what or whose perspective is the actual truth? Now, before we go any further, I want to introduce you to the wonderful panel we have here today who are going to be discussing this topic. And of course, if anybody has any questions, put them in the Facebook chat. And I think I've got Steffi moderating and she'll feed the questions to me. And we've lost Tamara. Hopefully she'll pop back in any second. So who do we have here? Well, first, let me introduce Jools Williams. Jools is a self-declared recovering self-sabotager who is actually now focused on coaching holistically and helping her clients to learn to love themselves and to live life more harmoniously and in a more joyful way. Welcome, Jools.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's great to have you here. And we also have Patricia Cherry. Patricia has written a book called The Truth Has Set Me Free, after an interesting start to life and an interesting first marriage. And I'm sure Patricia's going to talk to us about some of that later. But basically what she's told me is that she always tries to live her truth and be a source of wisdom for future generations. So welcome, Patricia, or Trish. Let's call you Trish, as we discussed earlier. And last but not least, we also have Tamara Alvarov, who has a impressive array of qualifications in so many areas of life, and who the use of plants for deep and lasting healing, who has skills in languages, literature, art, philosophy and psychotherapy, and operates both private practice and runs workshops. So a huge wealth of experience we have here today. So welcome, Tamara.
Thank you, Liz. Happy to be here.
And thank you for being here. So I think this is the first panel for all of us, and we're just going to dive right in and go around the room. And the first question that I'd like to put to you all, and if you can all answer the same question one at a time, I'll start with you, Jools, if that's okay, is no, before I say that, I just want to say, when I started this, I thought, what does the dictionary say is the definition of truth? Now, this is quite illuminating, or not illuminating, as the case may be, because it actually says truth is the quality or state of being when something is true or truthful. So then I went, okay, well, what does it say in the dictionary about true? And it just says, in accordance with fact or reality. So that brings us full circle back to, what is the truth? Is there any such thing? Jools, what's your take on that?
I think that explanation is exactly it, how I feel, that the truth is so malleable And for me, it is very much connected to the present moment, and it's very much connected to feelings. It's very much connected to our ability to regulate our feelings, understand them, and realize actually what they're all about. I don't want to talk too much about feelings per se, but I do believe that the body does keep the score. And I think the body has its own wisdom. And I think for various reasons, we have been trained out of that ability to deeply connect to our bodies. And I'm sure Tamara will explain more if that's appropriate, because Tamara kind of pretty much works very deeply into natural medicine. I think natural medicine is a word that can describe healthy living, if that makes sense. So for me, it's around the present moment, feelings, the naturalness of our being, and our sense of who we are within. And initially I thought it was within the planet, but actually now I think it's within the universe, now that we've got a lot more understanding around the quantum aspects of everything, you know, everything, all this is. So I know that might sound a bit vague. It's not set in stone, but I do think the truth is malleable as well by people who want to use an understanding that other people's truth can be then maybe uncertain around their truth. And I think people can manipulate people because of that. So I think it's very important for us to understand what our own truth is and to stand our ground when we feel that we have nailed our actual truth in that moment, which can change again in the next moment.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it's more of a personal thing within the universe.
I believe so. I believe it's connected to the golden thread where we feel is our connection to spirit, God, source, all that is, the creator, whatever word you want to put on that infinite, original sort of creation that created everything. There is a lineage. It might be incredibly long, that lineage. It might be incredibly complex. It might be very difficult to nail completely, but I do believe there is a connection. And I think if you can, and I think it's trying to find your own awareness of where you kind of fit in that can help us think, well, that's my truth at this moment. And I think it's very much connected to trust in one's own consciousness.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, Tamara, how do you feel about this?
What a massive topic this is. I mean, my mind's going off in all amazing directions here. And, picking up a little bit from what Jools has just said. I don't go and check the sound here. Am I clear?
Yeah, you're fine.
Good. So I don't think anybody can ever know the truth, if there is such a thing. The truth, as Jools said, what can be true in 1 nanosecond can be absolutely the opposite in the next nanosecond. So there are different levels, I think, we can look at this. And one is what is true for me in this moment is that I'm feeling, if I check in with myself and my body's quite relaxed. I'm poised on a chair here in a corner of a bedroom that I'm staying in a friend's flat, looking around. I've managed to find a sort of neutral corner. The rest of the room is kind of full of her colourful clothes and rags and dolls and all sorts. So true for me is in this moment, I am sitting here with you, talking to a headset. But I'm discovering more and more as I go through life that there is something beyond what we can, beyond what you can actually perceive or know. There is a vast realm while our perceptions are necessarily limited. We only use something like, I think that something like 83% of our brain capacity is unused, which is it's a huge statistic. I can't remember the number, but most of our brain capacity is not used. We don't access it unless there's some intervention that will expand the mind expanding processes like breath work or ecstatic experiences or psychedelics or whatever people use to expand the brain, and then you can perceive different levels, and you think, I thought this was the case and no longer is. And so I've learned that one of my practices, long-term practices, and one that has served me most in my life, is based on the work of Byron Katie. And it's the question is, well, I make a statement and it's based on what I'm believing in the moment. And the first question is that true? And at the moment it's true for me. And then the next question is, can you absolutely know that that's true? And invariably, the answer has to be no. Has to be no. The only way I can know what is true for me is to do with my feelings. And my feelings are based on what I'm believing in the moment. My beliefs are based on what I've heard and the information I have available at every moment. And so it gets a little more complicated. When you go down that, you look at that, actually, I only know what I have available to me. So that's what I have. It isn't necessarily limited. Remember, there's what we call universal truths. I'll stop now because this, like I said, it's a huge topic. My mind's going off in all these directions. So shall I? Yeah.
Hold that thought. Maybe we'll come back to universal truth, or maybe we'll talk about it in another panel. But thank you for that. And now, Patricia, Trish, you wrote your book called The Truth Has Set Me Free. So what's your take on truth, the truth, your truth?
Well, as a child, I was brought up in fundamental Christianity, and I was made to believe that what they were saying, and I'm saying they in inverted commas because it always seemed to be Sunday school teachers and pastors and people like that who impressed on us children at the time that only Jesus had the truth. There was only one way. I was also constantly singing hymns like Jesus loves me, this I know, but I never actually felt it ever. And you were saying about feelings. I never felt that Jesus loved me. Jesus was a stranger who lived 2,000 years ago. And what's he got to do with me? But it wasn't until the age of it was after my first divorce, and I was about 43 years old then. And a few years later, I met my second husband. And he was the catalyst to me finding out, first of all, what wasn't the truth. Because I remember just mentioning to him something that Jesus said. And he said, actually, how do you know he said that? And it was a challenge. And so from that moment on, I started reading, researching, doing courses, studying people like Wayne Dyer and all these people, and finding out that eventually that actually what I had been brought up to believe, that I was never good enough unless I was saved. The word saved meant that I acknowledged Jesus Christ as my personal savior. And as far as they are concerned, and I've still got two cousins who firmly believe that, I've never felt real. I never ever felt real. Never felt as if I was living in truth. And then finding out for myself what wasn't real, what wasn't the truth, eventually brought me around to recognise that the I am the truth. We said we'd go into universal stuff later on, but something only last week, something struck me. I can't remember her second name, but she's called Jude. She's a physicist. And what she said was, I am consciousness. It's something it isn't something I've got. And I thought, my God, that is so fundamental, so true. That's exactly how I feel.
I can hear you, Nino. It's amazing.
What's going on?
I don't know where that's coming from.
That came from my phone. I've no idea why, but it said something about amazing. So
yeah. So I mean, to this day, I think I've found we find our own truth in everything, really. What colours we like to wear, what food we eat, how we live, how we breathe.
And I'm going with Michael Gill, who's
putting
putting it all on the line for our country.
I'm sorry.
And,
Something's gone off
much
here,
longer
and
than you
I'm
would.
not sure how to get out of it.
Put it on. Put it on.
You're breathing
It is
I'll
on
mute
mute.
you for. I'll mute you for a second, and you can then mute that, and let us know when it's just give me a thumbs up when it's gone off. Okay, so I can unmute you again. Oh, you need to unmute yourself. I can ask you to unmute.
Sorry about
Okay.
that. That was sorry, Patricia.
It's life, it's truth, it's in the
Yeah.
moment. This is what's
Yeah.
happening. And interestingly, we all have our own truth, but we're all experiencing that in the same moment. And we're probably all having different reactions to it. I'm thinking, oh my God, stop that. It's like, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all, does it? And I'd like to pick up on what Trish just said about I am. So like I am consciousness, I am truth. But how does this fit? Because 8 billion people in the planet, on the world, are, and each has their own truth. So how does that all hang together? If we each have our own truth, how do we reconcile that if there's so many different versions of a truth? If it's fleeting, if it's just in the moment, is this perhaps something that underlies conflict because everybody has different truths?
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that for a good 2,000 years we've been taught that we're separate beings, and so whilst we may already all have our own truths, if we find a truth of I am loved, I am love, if we all found that fundamental, I think it's tolerance as well, it's intolerance of other people's beliefs. Now that brings us down to there's a difference between believing something and knowing something. And I think this is where a lot of the teaching that we have, we're told what we should believe, but we're never ever told what we should know. Well,
Yeah.
it comes down to exams at the end of the day, doesn't it? At school.
Yeah.
And so for every religion or culture or whatever, we're taught to believe what the leaders tell us. And I think what's happening is that we are from the ground rising. There are people like us who want to know what the truth is and look at these things. We're rising.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I can remember having conversations with my dad, who was very religious, and he used to say to me things like, well, you just have to have faith. I'm like, but I don't. Like, can you answer this question? Well, I have faith. I'm like, I'm sorry, you might have faith that is the truth, but I don't. And he said, you have to have faith. And we used to go around in circles. I'm like, well, I just don't get it, because there's something not quite right, because I studied history and I've studied different religions as well. And they're very similar and very different in many ways. And I don't want to get into a whole discourse on religion, but are they not all created by the patriarchy to keep us in some place, you know, to create a truth for us?
Yeah.
Jools, do you want to respond to that?
But George Carlin's popping up. George Carlin, the comedian, he was quite controversial because he was brave enough to put his head above the parapet. And in those days, he was tolerated and people were able to hear his truth. How different it is now. But George Carlin said that any group that's more than a one is a cult.
More than a what?
Basically, any group that's more than a one is a cult. when you take it right back, strip it right back to your own roots, you become your own cult of one. Therefore, if you just see it as a cult, it's just a belief system. So if all we're doing is all having our own belief system, that actually denotes freedom. That actually denotes a threat to people who are trying to rule us. So they use the absolute opposite, and they persuade us to join cults of thousands, because any cult that's more than one can be dangerous in and of itself. So a cult of thousands, they can flip the natural law of opposites and use the power of the cult to control masses and masses of people.
Wow. And
Is that true?
is that
true?
That is an analysis through my own belief system, filters, learnings, and that's the understanding I'm at in this present moment. And then tomorrow something could be revealed that completely knocks that off the table.
It's our perception of what we've been taught about history, isn't it? So, Tamara.
Yes, I think we live at the most interesting time. I mean, this question is so relevant to what is happening in our world at this moment in time, and again at the next moment, at the next moment. We are taught that there's one truth that patently turns out to be untrue the next day, and then we are taught that that wasn't true either, and then there's something else is presented as truth. And I think I was incredibly lucky in my childhood, because I was never raised with any dogma whatsoever. I was born just before the Second World War, and none of the propaganda was preached to me. No religion was preached to me. I was raised to ask questions, and I have always asked questions, and I would ask questions, particularly had a good time because my classmates would egg me on in the scripture class. And Miss, what was it called? Miss Wilson, I think she was called. Oh no, that was a French teacher. Anyway, Miss Strickland, and she loved her scriptures, the Bible studies. And I would always question, and I would ask, ask questions like, well, how that's not possible, Miss? That really isn't possible. Standing up in that scripture class, Miss, and I would also sort of challenge her a little bit and say, Miss, what does begat mean in the Bible? So if you've ever read the Bible, you know that begat means got a child upon. So it was also patriarchal anyway. But I have never just swallowed hook, line and sinker anybody's opinions or dogma ever in my life. And I'm not about to start now. And I've been quite a rebel in the last 3 years, 4 years, as some of you know. I won't say any more about that for the moment, but we are presented with something, and I think we're going to continue to be presented with things that are patently not true. And the same with religion. If you step out of line, if you don't behave like this or do that, you'll be punished. You won't go to heaven. You won't be baptized. You won't be Jesus's friend. Nobody's going to laugh after you. You'll die in a gutter. And it's like people are running on fear, and fear mongering destroys what's true. And I've seen many people whose belief systems have been seriously wobbly since in the last few years. And it's not new. The propagandist machine has been running for a very long time. So yeah, I don't want to start off on a rant, so I'll slow down.
No, but it's illustrative of the fact that religion, propaganda, all of this is created, and I'm almost thinking it's created to keep us from the truth. And the only truth that we do know is what we know in the moment. So what if we're all wrong, or what if we're all right? Is there any possibility that perhaps each of us has a snippet of what is the truth. And in order to arrive at the truth, that relies on consensus, collaboration, and coming together to actually, we're all connected, and that we need to know that and work through that before we can arrive at the truth, because we all have to bring our own pieces together and fit it all together. This has just popped into my head. What does anybody think about that?
Well, when you
Jools?
just mentioned that, the fairy tale of Kai and Gerda, the Snow Queen, popped into my head, and Kai was abducted by the Snow Queen, who planted a sliver of a mirror, I think, in his heart, and so he couldn't have his feelings. And it's these old fairy tales tell the truth. They really tell the truth, and they're heavily disguised. So they had to be disguised because religion didn't like the old tales, and religion. Now, I'm not anti-religion. If it serves people to be religious, I won't go into a criticism of people's religious faith, and that's up to them. So yeah, but I love the old wisdoms and the old fairy tales, and the way of divining, the way of, like Jools, you said, what is truth in your gut feeling. Your body tells the truth. Body, yeah. And Patricia, yeah. So discovering for yourself, it's in a sense writing your own fairy tale, isn't it?
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think excellent. The fairy tales can be excellent, and they can also be written in a way to. So I talked earlier about shining light on the dark. If someone's in the dark, they could be blinded by too much light too soon. So I think fairy tales were excellent to give people the will to get deep into them, to decide whether they wanted that knowledge. And I think it then respects people's free will as well.
Yeah.
Rather than, bopping someone on the head and saying, you need to switch the light on. But I don't know where the light switch is. Oh, well, you just need to find it. That kind of attitude. And that's why I think we've been so very, very clever as humans to invent a almost alternative world that people can connect to when they start to go inside and look at their own inner wisdom. You are connecting, for me, to an alternative world that is potentially non-mainstream, non-MSM. And that's why it's been kept secret over millennia, because the people that rule are fully aware of this, and now and again go on a rampage to try and stamp it out, because they don't want people to feel a sense of freedom too much, because that can be threatening to the ruling regime.
That's where fear comes in. That's where the fear comes, the fear mongering comes in, isn't it? And if you look at Hansel and Gretel, the little boy and the little girl went off into the forest, exploring the wonderful dark forest, the unknown, and come adventuring, and they did little trails so they could find their way back home. But they were the warning was a terrible witch is going to cook you and eat you. And so, that was a moral tale to control any deviations from the light as it was perceived off the path, the designated path, you get into terrible trouble and be killed and eaten, basically. So, the morals, yeah.
Don't connect to witchy magic, you muggles, because you'll get eaten.
Yeah.
That's going on for millennia. That's gone on for, hasn't it?
Yes. Or you'll go to hell. And that was one big thing in my life. I was always warned that I would go to hell.
Yeah.
But what I have learned is, as I say, I've got two cousins who still firmly into fundamental Christianity. And I've said to them, I respect your beliefs. I want you to respect my truth. The truth, Jesus' truth is real for you. You need to respect the fact that my truth is real for me. And I think people who are brainwashed, if you like, what strikes me is how many of these people who blindly follow faith go by their gut feeling. Is it all coming from the head or is it coming from the heart? If it's coming from somebody's heart and they find it works for them, then I need to respect that. And so, but I would expect them to respect me as well. I've been told, oh, we're so sorry you've lost your faith. Can't get them to see that actually my life is rich. It's full of joy and happiness and freedom. And if you feel that, then that's fine by me. I'm not going to argue.
And this comes back to that is their truth. They're ruled by the fear of what if they step out of line, whereas it's almost like you've cast off that mantle, you have a different truth, and you don't need to be afraid of those consequences that they're probably in their faith still afraid of.
Yeah.
They will also have been taught that they were very, very worried about their cousin who no longer believes what they believe, and that they should make every effort to persuade you to come back.
Yes, and also if they tell me they're praying for me, I ask them, what are they praying for? Are you praying for me to come round to your way of thinking? You know, or do you genuinely care for my welfare? It's very sad. When my husband was alive, he was complete out. He used to call himself an atheist, but I won't go into all that because it's not true. He wasn't. But my mother said to my brother, do you know, I think the world of Tom. I think he's wonderful, but it's so sad that he's going to a lost eternity. And that said it all. I thought, how sad that you think like that. But it was true.
So that's another question. What's the truth about where do we go?
Yeah.
Does anybody know the truth about that?
Yeah. Nobody does, do they?
Well, it seems to be a fact that you cannot believe what you don't believe, and you can't not believe what you do believe, unless you know how to work with your beliefs or are willing to work with those beliefs. You cannot unbelieve something until you do. You know, it's so kind of obvious and simple. It just it misses us. But I think that there's, you know, that's fundamental to what we're talking about. Yeah.
And history is obviously full of examples of people who believed certain things and the truth, a different, maybe not the truth, but a different truth has come out later, and they were like, oh, I didn't realize. I thought this was happening. I mean, I'm not going to get into, you know, specifics, but I think we all know certain things that would fit that scenario. And, you know, some of those things just came out of fear and control as well. So this, you know, this is another big question. Why is there this apparent fundamental need to instill fear and control others to effectively prevent people knowing the truth? What's all that about?
Because we're predators in the main. For me, we are predatory, we're animals, we come from the mammalian, and we can choose to not go into predatory behaviors of the lower, or I would say, instincts. So the predatory behavior is to look after your territory, you know, to get rid of a threat. I think it's obviously it's human consciousness working, but I think it's at the level that's very limited. Like you mentioned, limitation, Tamara. I think those people's kind of awareness of all that's possible is quite limited, or they act that they're trying to get other people to believe it's quite limited. So it's manipulation of people's own fear. It's the ramping up of that fear. It's the triggering of it. We know it's easy to trigger someone who's very vulnerable. So they come across as being very powerful, very predatory. The general population generally feels vulnerable to being told what to do unconsciously. and they manipulate that for their own benefit, which is predatory behavior.
Yeah, I agree. And what's been put in my mind in the last few minutes, and Liz, you mentioned earlier the patriarchal system, and what's been in my mind is the witch burnings. And I think a great deal of what we're looking at in the world today goes back to the original society, human society, was a matriarchy, and we kind of know that. And thankfully, I've seen quite a lot of evidence of us coming back towards that in baby steps. But society, I've just come from a 4-day event where I suppose about a third of those present were males, from very young, like 12 up to in their 80s. But beautiful men doing their very best to be the best men they could be. And they articulated this in a way of something that is coming through newly, which is about serving the feminine, serving the divine feminine, supporting our women, supporting our mothers, encouraging our girl children. And for me, it's like I got goosebumps when I was saying that, But I do think that a lot of the repressive systems has been in order to suppress the power of women. If you look at Mary Magdalene, Patricia, you know about what happened to her, and the divine feminine of the past, and the goddesses, and all the Greek mythology, all of that. It's all about the patriarchy and what it's been doing to the whole human race. And there's more to be said about that, but that's probably for another call. I'm not sure. But
yeah, it's a fascinating topic, which brings us around in another loop. The suppression of the divine feminine, who the divine feminine being at the root and the core of everything that has been suppressed for millennia. So are we starting to see little dots of light? I mean, I'm seeing it. We've gone through all this. Natural medicine is no good. You have to use fabricated medicine, and it always astounds me that they base a lot of chemical medicine on nature, but they have to recreate it and then actually have to tell you that that the natural stuff is no good for you. And my head spins on that. And it's another question: what is the truth? Is it the real stuff that grows out there in God's universe, or whatever the universe is that has been created for us, or is it the man-made stuff that has been created? What actually works? Tamara, you can probably talk to that.
Oh, my mind jumped. I mean, I'm very excited, as you can tell by the conversation, and it's full of interesting avenues. But what came back into my mind just now was the old midwives, who knew how to support a woman in labor, knew how to support each other during pregnancy and so on, had herbs to change that situation if necessary, and would manage the birthing of all the children in their society. And the attitude towards, that sums it up really. That you've got the ancient images of the fertility goddesses. They've got little Neanderthal fertility figures this big in the museum here. Wonderful little museum, an archaeological museum, and those are 16,000 years old. Little figures for fertility, and they actually knew that this was the answer to everything, was fertility. Was the birth of human beings in that case, and their animals and their plants, and all of that was all supporting the whole system. And but so men being so in awe of the power of life giving, which they didn't even know how babies got to conceive for a very long time, I think. Well, that surmising, I don't know if that's true. But the swelling of a woman's body and the emergence of a new baby human being must have been incredibly magical. Wow, how did you do that? Oh, look, it's like and then, because that's such a powerful position, the patriarchal system, as soon as they possibly could, they medicalized pregnancy, and they pathologized pregnancy, and they pathologized giving labor. And the belief was that the babies fell ill and there were puerperal fevers, and the women often died because the woman's vagina was.
Oh,
That's the belief that they ran on. And so, but it wasn't. It was actually them that they never washed their hands when they were handling the woman giving birth. It was the male surgeon sort of, you know, I'm clean. It doesn't matter if I'm grubbing about in my private parts or, you know, handling whatever on the way to help this woman giving birth, drag the baby out and infect the whole system. So they blamed the women also for the death. And from there on, we go right up to the, you know, the medicalization, surgery of bringing a baby out into the world. You know, let's cut the woman open and take the child out. So spare the woman the labor. Actually, we're going to take over now. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No,
I love
no,
to hear you talk, Tamara. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Jools, what
It
you were
led me
about
to
to
a
add
question
something?
about, you know, the artificial womb is being created so that further maybe reinforces the power over the natural, the womb.
Yeah.
And I grew up hearing a phrase bandied about, penis envy.
It's what?
I believe it's actually womb envy. And I think it's that.
What was the phrase?
I was growing up, I heard this phrase bandied about that was penis envy. But actually, as I've grown older, I've realised it's actually womb envy. And there we've got that law
Yeah,
of opposite again, where
Yeah, what she said, Tamara, was penis envy.
Oh,
You know,
yes,
this
yes.
was another way to put women down. You know, don't you wish you had one of these?
exactly,
And, you know,
actually womb envy.
Yes.
And then you've
Yes.
got the shadow of the law of opposites, where they're saying, oh, you know, you're jealous of us, but actually, or envious of us. Maybe it's more that the men are envious of that amazing manifestation of creation that women display.
Yeah.
Why don't they just say, well, yeah, we did have a part to play too. And don't worry about it. Women give birth. In the next life, you might come back as a woman and you can experience it. Instead of in this life, perpetuating the envy and the fear of what they perceive to be some sort of magical superiority of the woman. Maybe that is so on the spiritual level, but in the material, men have their value too. So if they diminish themselves, that's their problem in a way.
well, yeah, you cannot have one without the other.
Absolutely not.
And, you know, that, you know, I'd argue that probably is a truth, a fundamental truth.
Well, if we call it yin yang, people tend to be more happy to accept it. If you say it's actually the balance of the yin yang that does cover the masculine and the feminine in the energetic places, you can then extrapolate that down into realism, and you can act out what would be natural law anyway.
Which is all about balance. Balance too, hey?
I was thinking for a moment there, Jools, that the Chinese were very wise with the yin yang and so on. But then you've got the I Ching, and it's all about the master. And then my mind went to the Chinese foot binding, you know, where they bind the girls, they break her toes and bend them back under the ball of the foot, and she can never walk again. So you know, this is ultimate in what slavery, I suppose.
Yeah,
enslavement.
I think, you know, the sort of the expression of it in the material may have been really, really distorted by oppressing the women in that about the foot binding and, you know, the master thing. But on the spiritual level, for me, yin yang is a spiritual concept.
Yeah.
It's a concept that if one can choose to sort of express that concept in the real world. What is balance? Maybe that's truth. Maybe the truth is that the universe is balanced and we can emulate the universe. The earth is balanced. We can emulate the earth. We can balance our inner being. Then we've got good foundation to go forward and say to people, don't worry about whether you agree what is my balance. My balance might look different to you. But for God's sake, go and balance yourself, you know? No,
I love
no,
that. Yeah.
for God's sake, go and balance yourself. However that is, balance yourself.
Yeah.
And you can only do it. So obviously, I'm a massive fan of the inner work. So for me, my truth is that everything relates to everything within me. Everything. I am part of the universe, therefore, I've got correspondence all the way down to my roots, all the way down to my bones, with everything that goes on up there in the cosmic.
So to extrapolate from that, if we are all balanced within and we've done the inner work and we're all connected, do you think that could lead us to a balance in the universe and some level of different truth, whether that is the truth or not?
Yeah, I think it's that raising that vibration, the sense of the dimension in which we are at the moment. And then that's another story, isn't it? You know, it's what your own belief is about the dimensional and the different planes of existence and all that.
One of the things that's happening.
I think in
you
about
talk about
absolutely vital.
Talking about balance, we've been trained to believe there are opposites, that everything is in opposition, and that is happening more and more now, the divide and separate, divide and rule. You know, that's come more and more to the fore lately. But with I Ching, what we know and what we feel to be true within ourselves is that I have the potential to be that. I am this and I am also that. I have within me the speck of the masculine, and with the masculine has within the masculine the speck of the, and that's the diagram of the I Ching is within, and we are partners. We are entwined with the I Ching symbol. It's a twining together of equal parts. And within each part, there's the opposite as well. And it's such a beautiful image. And thank you for bringing that in, because I think we need to remind ourselves of that it's a harmony and a collaboration, not against anything. The more we are against anything, the larger the conflict and the more war we create. And this is being created by the powers that be at the moment is a frightening war. So we do what we can to create peace.
And the more conflict there is, I guess, the further away from the truth humanity actually stays.
Who knows? I mean, I think, we may need to go, it's like the pendulum swings and it has to go as far as it can possibly go to backtrack, to come back to the equilibrium. Maybe we're being really pushed hard to wake up. Look where we've come to. Maybe I don't know.
But who's pushing? Where is the pushing coming from? Where's the truth in that? We're pushing against something, and the four of us are all really conscious of that. But I am very much aware that there are an awful lot of people out there who are not of this same mindset, who don't think about inner work, and who live in fear, and who, so once again, where is the truth at? Why are we drawn to push against this, to find the light, to find the truth, to achieve balance, to find love, to connect, to all of those things which seem to be enmeshed in this whole concept of truth?
Expansion, breathing, I think expanding, getting more air in, getting more light, more space around. We're wondering how Patricia, how is this working for you? The world grew much bigger for you when you
Oh,
realize the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in every one of us, sometime during our life, is given the opportunity to find these things. But because most people are not conscious that they are consciousness, they don't recognize it for what it is. And so they walk right past. But I do believe that if we are the universe is going to keep giving that opportunity. If we turn it down, then we reap the consequences. It's a shame that more people can't. I mean, I constantly get surprised. We walk around thinking everybody else is unconscious, but when it comes down to things like seeing your grandchildren taking part in a meditation at school, then you realize there is a shift. There is something happening, and that maybe through that meditation, that child is going to want to explore further and find out exactly what is truth to them. I can't see it happening in our lifetime, but I do think that we can be the catalyst, and hence this is why we're on this call. It's a catalyst to get other people. I mean, I've told several people about this call and said to them that I'll send a link afterwards because they'd like to see it. And just from that, we sent a seed. We've planted a seed just by having this discussion. I never dismiss anything as it just happened to be that way. I always think there's a purpose.
Absolutely. So what do you feel that we can do to be more of a catalyst for this? What should we, as wise elder women, be doing, do you think? Anything more than we're doing already? I'm sure there's plenty, but I'm just curious as to what the three of you think.
Be kind. Be kind. I find that people do not respond to criticism or persuasion or arguments or challenge of their beliefs. They don't respond. Everybody gets a bit defensive if you question what they're believing, confronting. So being kind, and tell me more about the way you live. Tell me more about how, what leads you to make those decisions. It's rather being to bring people out rather than push them into a corner, I think. So being kind, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
And trust. I've come to a place in my life I'm very grateful for, where I have complete and utter trust in pretty much everything right now, because it's been my experience. I arrived here with nowhere to stay and no car, and you need a car to get around, and everything is just unfolded really beautifully. So I experience an enormous degree of trust these days. So that's my personal experience.
Well, that's your personal creator experience as well, the trust and belief, and it happens. And I'm there too, and I think this house would not have happened. This house, this move to Italy, would never have happened without that trust and belief. I had no idea how it was going to happen, and it is evolving around me and getting rebuilt and turning into this magical place that it will be when it's finished. But that and so we're kind of moving around to like trust and believe. I think put you on mute a second. There is this huge capacity in us to trust, and maybe so many of us don't, or so many people do not have that capacity to trust because they still live in fear and they're not able to move forward.
I think that's the difference between when you were talking, Patricia, about, was it you, Liz, that was saying about your dad, just have faith. For me, faith is very much a whimsical kind of energy, whereas trust is a grounded, you bang your staff on the floor, you stand your ground. That's trust.
Yeah.
And maybe for me,
Yeah.
that's very, very much aligned to my truth. So trust and truth are twins for me, you know. But it's very, very hard to explain it in words because it's more of a
And
feeling, it's an
it
embodiment.
comes round as well to having an absolute, doesn't it? You know, and is there an absolute truth? And
Well, that's
you know, I'm inclined to say at this moment, we've just got a few minutes left. You know, the truth is out there. You know,
Maybe truth
But-
is the what do they call it? The philosopher's stone, the holy grail. Maybe that's truth, and that's why we seek, because we need an incentive to go seek, to grow. So therefore, it's that leading the dog by the nose with the treat, you know, get the dog. So what are we going to entice people to want to grow for? We're going to give them something to look for. And maybe the thing we are all looking for and seeking is the truth.
and then, but if we're seeking, where are we seeking? You know, because what you said earlier is it all within? And yet, a lot of this seeking is
Absolutely.
external.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the
Oh.
seeking is for me.
Yeah.
Seeking
Sorry.
for me is looking into, like I said, I've done sort of 10 years of research and listening to people, listening to various teachers, and every now and again you get this leap within you that says yes, and that is how we find it. That's how we find.
Yeah. Yeah. That sort of bodily response, that
Yeah.
I call it activation. You probably do, Liz. You know, Reiki for me was a huge activation to open me up towards my truth, a Kundalini opening, you know, a Kundalini rising moment when I trained, when I had my first Reiki experience. And it was an activation. It was literally a spiritual awakening, a spiritual activation that I literally felt in all the way through my body. So maybe the body keeping the score for me is very foundational towards building on my truths.
Yeah.
And
And we do. I know that when I have learned any modality, well, it didn't happen initially. I mean, I'm trained in Reiki and Rahanni and sound healing therapy for animals and people, and you know, much more, you know, coaching skills and all sorts of different modalities that I have studied. And I have studied religions, and I've studied philosophy, and I've looked at science and studied science. And it suddenly came to me not so long back that this wasn't a learning. Everything that I have learned in this life is not a new learning. It is a remembering. And that is my truth. You know, the connectivity, the remembering.
It's a remembering.
I'm sorry, I had to dash off.
That's right.
Desperate cries from my Greek friend whose flat I'm staying in, and she pretty much set fire to the kitchen. And she thought I'd left a pan on, but I haven't been near the stove in the last several hours. And she'd burnt a pan of food, and the whole thing is full of smoke now. But that was just as I was talking about trust, wasn't it? And but since you mentioned Reiki, a wonderful example of this how I'm experiencing the world at the moment. I was given the name of a man who rent me a car. The rental has gone astronomical through the roof, and I wanted a better price. So I've been given the name of this man, Andreas. I went to see him to arrange to have the car on Friday, from Friday. So we get chatting, and he did this, and we did that. Andreas is he not only runs a car rental office, he's a Reiki master. He teaches Tai Chi. He does hands-on healing. I was like, you know, this is the most extraordinary world that I live in these days. People are showing up in the most unexpected places, and this is true for me. And I'm just loving life, really. So yeah. So this is no
separation.
Expectations.
Exactly. And that's another example of your truth, Tamara. That you are loving life. You are loving life. That's an example of your truth.
Yeah.
And because you're loving life, it's coming from your heart. So therefore, you are embodying truth.
Yeah. people feel it, you know. I'm just walking down the street minding my own business and doing nothing at all, and everybody's smiling at me these days. You know, it's like there's something has changed, because people used to find me quite forbidding, I think, but that seems to have changed in the last 15, 20 years, I think.
But they'll pick up on your energy, and you know, I'm conscious of time, and you know, we could go off in a whole another direction. I definitely think we need another one of these discussions about truth, because we've just dipped our toes in the water. I think there's a whole load of things that we could talk about. The matrix. Are we in the matrix? Where is the truth? Is truth remembering? Is what is what is the impact of artificial intelligence? What is the impact of the metaverse? And if everybody's living in the metaverse in artificial reality of some point, what happens to truth then? Where does truth go? Obviously we haven't got time to discuss all that now, but I reckon we should get together again and have another discussion. But right now, has anybody, I'd love to go around again if anybody's got any final words that they want to say on this matter to close out this particular session. So Jools.
I forecast that science and spirituality are going to merge.
Awesome.
That's my truth belief at this moment in time.
And that reminds me of Dr. Brian Cox standing on top of a mountain with a piece of rock in his hand. And if you haven't seen that, it's like we are all carbon. We all come from carbon. We are all connected. We have all evolved from these molecules of rock. That, he actually embraces that whole science and spirituality, and I think it's so long overdue. And yeah, I'm with you on that one. How about
Stardust.
you, Trish? Stardust, yeah. Trish.
Yes, I think the name in my book, The Truth Has Set Me Free, it's where I am. It's so liberating to know that he is not in charge of my life. I'm free to make my own decisions, bearing in mind that I am also love. And I am loved, and I can love other people. Not easy, not always easy, but I think that's where I am with truth. It's just freed me up.
Awesome. So
that's
truth
so
is
lovely.
love, truth is freedom. Yeah. Do you have a final word, Tamara?
Well, I've said quite a lot already, haven't I? I think, Jools, what you said, I think the scientists are now admitting that they've missed out big time, and they want to, they are realizing that we have known, and the alchemists have known, and the magicians have known, and the witches knew, and the wise women have always known the truth. And scientists are just beginning to discover this. The things they've recently announced in the paper is that science now has discovered that the herb rosemary might be very useful in the memory loss of Alzheimer's. And they're doing experiments using rosemary for Alzheimer's. Well, rosemary is a herb for remembrance, if you remember the saying.
Rosemary for remembrance. And there you go. That brings us in another circle on remembering. And I it's like, science and nature and remembering and knowing and truth and love and freedom. Amazing. I think we're losing your connection, Tamara. So we've gone 5 minutes over the hour. So I'm going to suggest, on that note of remembering and love and freedom all being part of truth, that we actually stop right there for today. With the concept that truth is somehow freedom, remembering, knowing, and it's in all of us. And I'll say, thank you, ladies, for a fascinating discussion. And I think we can safely say, to be continued.
Yes. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay. And over and out.